going to go down. If you want to come in here and tell us what to do, we're going to throw your ass out. And if you stop that, we're going to kill you. I'm pulling my knife out and I'm fighting to the death. They want to fight, they'll get one.
Anarcho-tyranny is when the state tyrannically or oppressively regulates citizens' lives, yet is unable to enforce fundamental protective law. That is the default modus operandi of the managerial state. The state and its appendages micromanage and regulate every element of private life, but are either unable or ideologically unwilling to enforce any sort of order based on property rights or national character. Virtually everybody lives in a state of semi-criminality and fear. How many adolescent girls steal makeup from their local mall? How many people regularly pirate online content? How many homeowners either knowingly or unwittingly ignore their Byzantine municipal property codes? The state is so massive and all-encompassing in its attempts to create order. Every street corner is being watched and recorded, and it's all publicly available. Your phone's location and data is always being tracked and recorded. Every meaningful financial decision is being fed into a curated, semi-private system of banks and advertisers that amass your ability to engage in future usury and to push whatever kitsch new product you should buy. America is in a state of anarcho-tyranny. The federal, state, and local governments demand that everybody stays at home for the pandemic and insists that all legitimate businesses be shut down until further notice. Yet, the state is wide awake and the people are restless. To quote Morgoth's review in his video, Free Falling, America has more military might than the rest of the world combined, and yet it doesn't have the will to stop its own cities from going up in flames. At the moment, 100 cities are on fire, race riots are resulting in billions of dollars of property damage, and many will die because of the new chaos piled on top of the ongoing pandemic. And yet, we live under a totalitarian state in which every rioter's phone location is known, every social media post reveals the identities of many rioters, and the American National Guard, state police, and intelligence community could deftly and violently quell the anarchy. But it doesn't. Almost every government and private institution has kowtowed to the protests. Almost every police department has conceded to whatever the hell criminal justice reform means. Every corporation with a social media account has expressed sympathy for the protests. And the establishment rights response has been to batten down the hatches and take virtue signaling photo ops. In my eyes, the daytime protests and nighttime riots have fallen flat. Every major institution is dedicated to something anti-white and something anti-order. What laws do the protests hope to change? What policies do the protests hope to implement? These protests are a response to the fact that the African American community commits disproportionate amounts of crime, and when the law comes to hold them to account, disproportionate numbers of acts of brutality slip through. This problem is endemic in every single Western city, from Detroit to Birmingham to Amsterdam to Palermo to Paris to New York. And the response to accusations of inequality under the law have been concessions. In the 1960s, during the midst of the Civil Rights Revolution and the Sexual Revolution, the federal and state governments conceded to the protesting masses and unleashed decades of chaos that have only recently come to pass. There was chaos on the streets, from the scummy 70s depicted in Taxi Driver, to the 80s drug war, to the 90s inner-city crime wave. Only after instituting a massive prison industrial complex, installing a police state, and possibly murdering millions of children in the womb did violent crime go down. Funny enough, immigration to America was cut back in the 1920s, and then picked back up in the 1960s. Would it really be a good thing if the government efficiently rounded up every criminal and physically violent criminal and semi-criminal it could get its hands on? No, we live in a bloated, Brazil-esque, inefficient, technocratic autocracy. Whatever, that's the state we live under. You cannot elect Facebook and Twitter out of power, just as you cannot fire the NSA, ATF, or the IRS, just as you cannot fire your local police department, state planners, or social services. That is the nature of state bureaucracies since the abolition of the 19th century political machines. The state is not particularly democratic or responsive at lower levels of government, but at least it's not formally corrupt. The state is democratic so long as the unelected bureaucracies abide by the will of the people as filtered by the demagogues that have been mindlessly elected into government by a clueless electorate. It's not like more than 2% of people ever turn up to vote for their local school board elections. And these people are the people that decide what your kids are taught in school. Within the proper channels of reacting to government policies, the only channel one has is elections, the consequences of social movements that may threaten a candidate in elections, and a vague sense of patriotic virtue. If you want to express rage at your government, you could protest your local officials. But what if you're angry at unelected officials like the police department? What if the police either enforce the law too thoroughly or not thoroughly enough? To quote Curtis Yavin in his recent article, Deep State versus the Deep Right, quote, "The 19th century Russian intelligentsia could at least dream of hurling bombs at the Tsar. The modern administrative state, no less autocratic, is quite Caesarless. It is an oligarchy, not a monarchy. It has no one who can be effectively bombed," unquote. The only way of revolting against decentralized institutions whose tendrils reach into every community institution is to take the siege pill and burn the community to the ground. The rule of law is supposed to cover every citizen and all of their property, so when the rule of law is burning, all property burns alongside it. But I thought every major government and corporate institution supported protesting against the man. To quote Simpsons troublemaker Bart Simpson, "Everybody is acting like me, so why does it suck?" To which his sister, Lisa, responds, "It's simple, Bart. You've defined yourself as a rebel, and in the absence of an oppressive milieu, your societal nature has been co-opted. There are no throwing bricks at systemic racism. There's only throwing bricks at small businesses and other people. The representative state wants to burn itself to further entrench its tendrils into a sinking ship. Anarcho-tyranny is trending. The zeitgeist is to burn all of the oppressors, but the only oppressor I see are stable buildings. Notice that not one government building has been torched or raided. Tyranny is for the government to inflict, and anarchy is for the plebes to suffer on the streets. The white plebes must suffer both spiritually and materially. They're the productive members of society that have the most to lose from America going to hell in a handbasket. They have savings. They have at least some stable families. They have historical family ties that link them to the great nation's past successes and to their present segregated suburban prosperity. That is why every white person must feel guilty. Out of empathy for the criminal ethnic underclasses, they must whip themselves while their small businesses burn. It's not about money, it's about status, and it's about sending a message of rage and control. Good and loyal allies enforce the soulless bureaucratic tyranny of Globo Homo, while joggers and Antifa anarchically burn down what is left of the middle class.